Hello, my name is Reed Harston.
And I'm Justin Fryer.
To talk to you a little bit about the apprenticing elicitation technique. We're going to talk a little bit about how it works, the upsides, downsides, and that we were able to gather throughout this week using the apprenticing technique about our project. So first off, how does apprenticing work? It kind of depends on the needs of your customer. You may spend a few hours with them or maybe even a few days depending on how complex their system is. Basically, the idea is you're going to around as if you were training to work in the position they're working in, whether to replace them or work, being that you're learning what they know. They're the master, you're the apprentice. And so as you go throughout the day, questions about how the process works. Don't want to ask all your questions at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day all at once as they come up. On the computer, you'll ask, how is it you do this? Or why is it that you do it this way? So you can understand the process better. Because research and study has found that it's easier to find all the details. The question, when the person is kind of in the act of doing the process. And so it's best to ask in the day. And then if they were to receive a document from somewhere else and they say, oh, well, now we need to forward this on to someone, ask about where that came from. Ask about the whole process details from them. Because if you think about, for example, taking something to the mail, if you ask about taking to the mail, they might say, oh, I'm just going to go put it in that box. They forget to mention they need to put a stamp on it or they need to label it and then seal it. Because those things you just kind of assume you know. So make sure you dig down and get all of the little details of all the steps of the process. And that's easier to do as an apprentice when you're there throughout the process. So make sure, that's one of the jobs of the apprentice, is to help guide with good questions to be able to answer with all details. Important is make sure they're talking about what they do, not, oh, well, we normally something or other. You do, like company suggest, or what does everybody kind of suggest, but that's not what you actually do. So make sure they don't talk too abstractly, make sure they're in detail. Kind of summarize or interpret what they say. And that way they can correct you, confirm what you've noticed. If you just ask them, oh, well, what do you do all day? They may say, well, and that won't be a very complete answer. Ask questions throughout the day, interpret what they do, and elicit their confirmation of your interpretation. You can get a much more detailed of what they actually do throughout the day. And so now Justin's going to talk a little bit about some of the upsides of this apprenticing.
Now, some of the advantages of this technique is that we get hands-on experience. It can be difficult sometimes to figure out all the intricacies and nuances of a position that we are not familiar with, and it's hard to do that in the form of a report. The advantage to being there in person is that you get to experience that firsthand. Now, customers often remember more about their work process as they're working rather than after the fact or during interview questions. So that's another advantage. You get a firsthand experience as they're doing the process. The customer can think of what they need to do and what might help them as they're doing it. Now, the next advantage is that the customer does not have to have an excellent teaching ability. They need to just go about their regular work, and us as the designers would be observing and asking questions so that we can get specifics about what is going on and how we can improve the process. And then seeing the work reveals details. Rather than remember all the details of a task or something they're doing, they mix up many similar events often and then talk about them in the abstract as though they were all one. This gives us a too generalized response from the customer. We need something more precise, more exact to improve the process. And then the apprentice can learn from the master's experience. The apprentice would learn the strategies and techniques of work by observing multiple instances of a task and forming his or her own understanding of how to do it, and therefore how to improve it. Now, there are some downsides to this as well. Number one is the time and cost. This method can require a considerable investment in time in order for the customer's process to become generally known, and we'll need to spend more time with a single customer than you would normally spend in some kind of documented elicitation fashion. The other downside is that it is possible to fall back into a different style of elicitation technique. If you're not careful, requiring a certain level of skill and focus from the software engineer apprenticing to their customer can ask too many generalized questions, not specific enough. The designer must articulate their understanding of the work structure. They must be able to talk to the customer about what they see, or else they will not be able to have the premise correct. So when they go to design the system, it won't actually help anything.
Looking at the upsides and downsides, we can think about a couple opportunities that would be good to use this technique. For example, about this system, about how it works, more about its intricacies you can get from an interview or simple observation. And when you're not too concerned about cost or time, if you have 10 different people doing 10 different things and you needed to apprentice with all 10 of them, it may not be a good idea to apprentice because the costs involved. You have to put everything in the balance. You may need to use a different clicker from all 10 people. But if you only have one or two that you can follow around, maybe worth the time, extra information that you can get. And as an apprentice, you can understand more of what the customer does. Basic examples that they'll answer your questions.
So what data have we elicited from this technique in relation to our app? Well, for one thing, we found that it needs to be a single central system. It's hard to set up appointments with team members because there is no single best means of communication with everyone in the class. Often there's a student that will send messages using email. There's another student that will send messages using Google Hangouts. There's another student that will use some type of collaboration tool. And it's so broken up that nobody's on the same system. And so when you're trying to communicate with somebody, you have to remember which system to use to even communicate with them. Having one system that everybody uses, we believe, would fix that problem. Another feature that we believe would be useful is file sharing. If the app used in iLearn was able to put everyone into groups, and then those groups would have a space for their files for that group in particular, that would go a long way to collaboration.
And since the point of the app is to help us schedule and our classes and our homework, scheduling as groups is one of the features it has. Help individual students schedule is something like a visual Kanban system similar to post-it notes on a whiteboard that you might do at home. Some way of helping the students keep track of what assignments they are working on and when they're completed. Having some sort of little bulletin system where you can, as in progress or in this assignment or complete, that will help a student visually see location from all of their in one place. And most of all, it needs to be simple. The idea of having one single central system, it's just one way of getting everybody in the class together, is that it'll be simple. Easy enough for everyone to want to use. As long as there are more options out there, everyone's going to find a different way of doing it, and that's where we get the system that's broken with everyone using something different. But if we can create one simple system that everyone's willing to use, board.
Now, those are the things that we have noticed about the during our apprenticeship elicitation. We think those will be greatly advantageous. But in dealing with the actual apprenticeship elicitation technique, in summary, when you are an apprentice, you should use it. Should you use an apprentice elicitation is when you need a deeper knowledge of the process that will be required to sufficiently design a system to aid in it. And then what is important for a designer to remember while they are apprenticing, they need to know that teaching ability is not needed from the customer. It is actually the apprentice's responsibility to ask questions and keep themselves mentally involved with the process so they can figure out the structure and see what matters, what details are important, and then be sure to always learn from the master's experience. Okay.
So that's our presentation on apprenticing, and we thank you for watching, and we hope you have a wonderful experience applying this in the field.